Canine Onyx was a donated dog. The handler was Linda Swank from Lancaster County, and Onyx served for 12 years. The other canine handler was Warden Darren Clark. His dog, Canine Sarge, was actually donated by one of our previous region directors. He was in Erie County, and Sarge had 10 years of service. The first unit really showed the value and what you could do with dogs. But the one thing that we learned was that organizationally, having a handler tied to a district did not provide maximum utilization because they were just tied down doing regular district duties a lot of times and couldn't respond to calls for service from other wardens. I've been the master instructor for both of the units. I gained most of my knowledge as a handler and instructor and kennel master in the United States Air Force. So I still really enjoy being involved with it. It's a little nice change of pace for me to get out and work with the guys. So in 2014, we restarted the unit, and the way that we did it is we created a canine handler / special investigator position organized under the Bureau of Wildlife Protection. 3 game wardens were selected for a western, central, and eastern regions, focusing on commercialization and multi-jurisdictional investigations. I also would say that at that time, they really provided a resource we sent them to a number of schools to become digital evidence recovery. With the amount of cell phones and Facebook type stuff out there, we needed that resource of some specially trained people to assist with investigations. And they also coordinate multi-state investigations with the law enforcement supervisor in the various regions. But some of these multi-jurisdictional investigations are not only complex, but they're very, very time consuming. And there has to be one person in charge to coordinate them. For example, I know one of the cases was a scenario, it was actually a U.S. Fish and Wildlife case, and they wanted to serve search warrants in 11 different states and have that done exactly at the same time so these guys couldn't call each other. That required a lot of coordination. They provide assistance primarily, though, they provide assistance to the district game wardens. They're a resource for them. If a district game warden thinks he's got a really big digital evidence case and wants to make sure they get everything, these officers will assist them in securing the evidence and processing the evidence. And primarily they provide canine assistance, though. So the commitment for the handlers, is that they need to make basically a 10-year commitment, which is the expected service life of the dogs. The canines are housed in the residence with the handler and family 24/7. They become part of the family with a life expectancy of about 12 to 14 years. Children and spouses get attached to the dogs. All health, discipline, training, and liability issues are the handler's responsibility. Why did we select labs? Primarily, the reason we selected labs is that hunters especially, but people in general, are comfortable with labs. They don't present the image of a great big shepherd or a Belgian Malinois, so they're much more accepted when the handlers are in the field checking hunters or working on a job. The other thing that works...
Rich, I recommend you just not use the microphone.
Yeah,
it kind of goes in and out.
I know.
It's very hard to
That's fine with me.
Thank you.
I don't need it. I can get loud enough. So we selected labs because people were comfortable with them, and no one was afraid of the labs generally. The other reason we selected them was the trainability, and the other thing that was good with them is a lot of times they may be checking hunters in the field with other dogs, and they're fairly comfortable with other dogs around as well. They're not aggressive towards other animals. And they have a relatively healthy lifespan. So the canines that we have right now are Canine Storm, assigned to Warden Lawrence Hergenroder, and he has the western region of the state, which encompasses the northwest and the southwest regions. The other dog is Canine Gunner. He's assigned to Warden Derek Daly. He has the central region, which is the north central and the south central. And Canine Sky, assigned to Warden David Allen, eastern region, northeast and southeast. So that's kind of the areas that they service. They're all generally located near Interstate 80 so that they can respond to either way, to either of the regions they're assigned to. They do work statewide also, though. So what do? The first thing is wildlife detection. They locate wildlife or parts of wildlife in vehicles, buildings, and open fields. They do article detection, which is an evidence recovery. They find the potential evidence that has human scent on it, such as live or fired shell casings, firearms, bows, arrows, knives, phones, wallets, and other items left at a scene. And a lot of times these items don't actually have to have the human scent if they've been there for an extended period of time. One of our best finds was actually Sky was called in to assist state police on a murder investigation that was 2 years old, and they were trying to find the murder weapon, and Sky worked the area. All they knew is they said this guy threw the knife somewhere in the woods. And the handler said, we don't have a high probability here, but I'll try it, and took it in, and Sky found it. So tracking is also one of the things they do. They follow and find humans based on the scent that is left on or near where they have been. Wildlife detection, they're trained to detect the presence of deer, bear, turkey, elk, and waterfowl. Those are the 5 specific scents that they use. A specific caller and command is used to let the canine know what tasks they are performing, so that you can switch gears between tasks. The dog knows what it's going to be doing by the type of collar it puts on. When commanded to find, the canine will locate the wildlife and sit to indicate where it is. So the collar and the command tell the dog what it's supposed to be looking for, and we've trained the response to sit for wildlife, whereas in an article search, we switch to a different collar, and when we release them with wildlife detection, same thing, specific command is there, so the dog knows now it's looking for articles, and then when they're commanded to seek, the canine will locate the article and then lay down on it. In the initial training with this, we train them by throwing shotgun shells, and the lab's natural retrieving instinct, they'll pick them up and flip them around. But at some point, we have to transition that because a lot of things that we're looking for, like knives, crossbow bolts, we don't want the dog mouthing because obviously it would injure the dog. So it takes
What's the difference in the collars?
The one they use a flat collar on, and the other one they just use the chain collar.
So it's just a feel.
It's basically just conditioning of the dog. So they know between that collar and that command, they know what they're doing.
Cool.
All right. And finally, tracking. They've been trained to find individuals by trailing their scent, and it's also some crushed vegetation or changes in the soil. They are capable of discriminating one individual from another. So if you have people that are walking all in on the same trail and you're looking for a specific person, if you have a scent article or you know where they were from like the door of a vehicle, once you start them on that, they can ignore all the other cross tracks. So, and the way the dog knows what they're doing there again, now we use a tracking harness because we don't want anything pulling on the dog's neck while they're tracking. So we switch to a harness, and with the command of track, they take off. And it's amazing to see from the time we first start them. One of the ways that we do it is whoever's going to be the track layer takes a hot dog and just rubs a little bit of it on their boot, and then lays what we call a scent pad, about a 30-inch area. They stomp around to get a lot of human scent in it, and then they go for the track. The dog comes up, he's given the command, starts following the hot dog scent. At the end of it, he gets the hot dog. So, and then eventually you can eliminate the hot dog. They're to the point right now, I mean, they're certainly not bloodhounds, but one of the drills that we'll do when we're training is at the end of one training day, we'll lay a track at the end of the day, and we'll lay it so that the track layer can be reinserted the next morning without contaminating the track. So these dogs have done tracks well over 12 hours old. Some of the tracks they've done 3 miles plus. So they can do water crossings. They could do a little bit of cross pavement tracking, even across pavement if it's fresh enough. And a lot of that depends on the weather conditions too. But they cross surfaces, they have to do cross tracks. What's really interesting though is a lot of times on these tracks, the dog's running the track and all of a sudden it'll notice an article. And it'll stop and the handler will pick it up, whatever it is, a shell casing, something like that. So that's kind of an interesting crossover between the disciplines. What we use as our standard is the North American Police Work Dog Standards for wildlife detection dogs. And it's actually the same standard used for most police dogs for article searches and tracking. The first canine unit was actually certified by them. We went to Cincinnati, Ohio, and had one of their master trainers do it just to kind of reinforce the quality of the dogs. Now we just use their standards and train in-house. Dogs certify annually, and they go on patrol with their handlers every day. We have specially rigged up vehicles for the canines. There's a few of the case histories here to show you how much these dogs have actually been utilized. This was a hunting under the influence happened in Luzerne County. A person called the local police department said there was a vehicle that was on their property that wasn't supposed to be there. She saw the guy get out of the vehicle, put an orange jacket on, grab his rifle, finish off a beer, and throw the can in her yard. So the local police had already worked with Skye quite a bit. They called for her assistance. Dave took her in, started right from the door of the vehicle, tracked the guy back into the woods, found him sitting on a log, drinking another beer. So he was, I guess his BAC was quite high because I think they found a total of 8 cans in the general area, plus whatever he drank before he got there. But we may not have ever found that guy without a dog. Gunner had a hunting-related shooting incident in Huntington County. There was some question as to who had shot the individual. They had a suspect, but they needed to connect some type of evidence to the suspect because there was multiple people in the area. Gunner was brought in and searched the area and found the shotgun shell that connected it to the shooter. Again, that was a case we might not have solved otherwise. This was an interesting case. It was an unlawful trapping and drugs in Luzerne County. It was one of our deputy officers that called in for assistance. He had some information that there was some illegal trapping going on in a particular area, but he hadn't had much luck in locating the individual. Skye went in, did the track, and it was interesting because they actually ran into the trapper on the trap line while they were there. So they ended up in a search of the vehicle, and they ended up coming up with some drugs. Our dogs don't detect drugs, but that was the officers hand searching for some other evidence in the vehicle. Storm had a hunting-related shooting incident in Forest County. This was kind of the same thing, but it happened in a really big area called Buzzard Swamps. And this was the same scenario. They needed to connect the shooter to the victim. She went in, and you see the picture on the right, that was the shot cell. Unlawful bear kill in Carbon County. What they did was they took the track all the way to the individual stand and found the blood at the bait site. So again, we may or may not have made that case without the dog. Gunner did a hunting on revocation in Huntington County. Again, it was a track. Skye had an unlawful bear in Schuylkill County. See how she's laying down on the left? She's laying down on the crossbow bolt that killed the bear. And again, that's why we don't want them to mouth the evidence. Besides the fact of moving the evidence, we don't want them to get hurt. Gunner assisted DCNR in an assault in Fulton County. I think this was one where there was an altercation between two groups of hunters, and at some point a shot was fired, but they didn't know who fired the shot. So when PSP or DCNR or whoever got, I think it was PSP, just secured all the firearms from everyone. But the problem was they waited 5 days to call Gunner in. And he went in and did this case and found the shell casing that, again, linked the guy that fired the shot. That was, the place had already been trampled over, used metal detectors on it, and they couldn't find the shell casing. They thought maybe the guy picked it up. And then as an afterthought, 5 days later, they called Gunner in. He was out of the car 5 minutes and found it. Lawful deer, Luzerne County. This was a guy that was just pretty much thrill killing, just shooting at deer with a .40 caliber handgun. He found 5 shell casings, I think, on that one. And they were buried so deep under the leaf litter that even though she alerted, they couldn't see them. But the handlers, the number one thing, and they've heard me say it 1,000 times from they first start, trust your dog. They're smarter than you. So when he alerted, the handler went and got the metal detector out and actually found them. And everywhere she alerted, they just, because they were handgun casings, they worked their way all the way down. We've had cases where our dogs have found things as small as 22 casings. And certification, they have to do it in 10-inch high grass. They have, I think it's a 60 by 60 foot area, 10-inch high grass minimum. They have 5 minutes to find 3 articles. So they work a lot quicker than a metal detector, and it saves you a lot of overtime from paying wardens to be out there with metal detectors or doing grid searches. This was a safety zone on lawful deer, shell casing. Again, casings are really important to tie the shooter. The witness here saw the individual get out and shoot in a general area, and Sky was called in to locate it, prove that the individual did shoot from within the safety zone. They aren't trained for this, but she looks like it on the left. Canine Sky they were actually in an area just to do a track. And when she started on the track, all of a sudden she cut off this railroad grade that they thought that the individual was on. She cuts off the railroad grade, cuts up into the woods, and comes up on a pretty substantial marijuana grow. I believe that was on game lands too. So, in closing, we've basically had a great deal of success with these dogs. Since inception in 2016, they've done 122 article searches, 78 tracks, 61 wildlife detections, and 93 I&E demos. And the value of a canine team for public relations, you cannot underestimate. I mean, it is just absolutely amazing how much people enjoy these dogs. And I think it gives us a very good way to get in front of the public and talk about our mission. For the actual investigation part of it, for intelligence gathering, they've had 463 calls for service. For non-intelligence gathering, it was 194 calls for service, and general game warden support, 387 calls for service. So the utilization is there, what we saw. One of the things, though, that's an inevitable truth with canine, clear back to my days as an MP, officers are only going to wait so long for a dog to get there, especially when they think it's a hot case. So one of the things we've seen with the utilization is that if the dog can respond within about 2 hours, the wardens will call for him and use him more often. If they've got to wait 4 or 5 hours for somebody to get there, they're not going to wait. And that's pretty much any enforcement. So they have, because of the success of the unit, what we've decided to do is we're going to be expanding the unit by 3 more canine handlers and investigators and 3 more dogs. The current dogs we got were from a kennel in Maine that's known to produce service dogs pretty much all over the country, from search and rescue to police dogs to whatever. We checked their references. They had pretty good health backgrounds on the dogs, and we're very happy with the 3 that we got there before, and probably anticipating getting 3 more there again. So that concludes my presentation. Is there any questions?
The dogs were used for INE, the last thing you.
Information and education.
Oh,
Like,
IND, okay.
yeah, doing a presentation for various groups. You know, it really is, it's amazing how much of a draw it is. We've gone to some events where there's, you know, multiple events going on or stations, and as soon as that dog presentation starts, that's where the crowd migrates to. So I really do think it helps out the image of the wardens, and I think it really does help out with presenting the agency in a positive light.
Good. Anything else? Thanks.
You had many successful recoveries of individuals that were lost. I know there was one last fall that was pretty notable.
Yeah, we have assisted, it's not just always enforcement. Sometimes our call for a track is for a missing and endangered person, and we've had several of those. One of them was emotionally disturbed 13-year-old, ran away from home, and they thought he was suicidal, and we were able to get on that track right away and find the kid. I think we've done some with elderly people that might have had dementia or Alzheimer's and just got lost. So they do participate in those type of activities as well.
Does the state police have dogs like that too to locate people, or
They have a
who
few.
decides whether it's the game commission or state police or local law enforcement?
Well, quite honestly, I think our dogs have got a reputation that at a lot of the local barracks, I think the local barracks call our dogs first.
Good.
A lot of their dogs are just trained for bomb detection or narcotics detection. They have a few trackers, but that's pretty much the extent of what they do. I'm not aware if they do any type of the article searches and things like that. So we do get a lot of calls for service from state police, regional departments, especially once they've worked with the dog the first time and they see the capabilities. We get a fair amount of work, and that's improved our relationship dramatically with state police, because normally if we're doing a case and we would send them, let's just say a cell phone or a computer to retrieve evidence off of it, we're not as high a priority as a lot of the other stuff that those digital forensic evidence units are working on. But once we started working with a lot of those, I mean, Dave Allen and Larry Hergenroder both can go into their local forensics unit and they stop what they're doing and they pull it off for them right there, hand it to them. And that's because of some of the services we've provided to them as well.
My only other question was, where you actually obtained those dogs. You already answered that. I thought that was pretty interesting. So there's actually just a breeder that breeds dogs for that purpose?
She does everything. June is her name, and she's in, her name of her kennels is Maranatha Kennels. And she does everything. She trains field retrievers. She competes in, field trial competitions, AKC events, sells those dogs for that type of work. But she also trains the working dogs more for search and rescue teams, enforcement dogs. And she looks at the puppies and she does what she calls the Braveheart test. So the dogs that are going to be going to the enforcement type units as working dogs, she picks out the boldest and bravest dogs out of a puppy. When she sees them out there, she has a pile of stuff, and the dogs that will climb up on things or crawl into things that show they're pretty much not afraid to leave the rest of the pack to go check something out. That's the dogs that she generally selects for that type of work. But we're very happy with the dogs we got, both health-wise and trainability. We may be able to do a demo a little later today if Dave Allen is here. And if we can, we'll probably just do it outside the lobby. And I think you'll be impressed because as a dog trainer, I train bird dogs and things too. One of the things you look for in a dog is called biddability. And what biddability is how much does that dog focus on you because it wants to work. It wants to work with you. And I think when you see Sky with Dave Allen, if he can make it in today, that dog never takes her eyes off of him. The hardest thing we had to train Sky with, there's Dave. The hardest thing we had to train Sky with was to heel because she didn't want to be right beside him. She wants to be out here looking at him. So that's how focused these dogs are and attached to the handlers. Dave, do you want to, Mr. President, do you want to do a short demo now or you want to do it later?
We can. We need to take a break. They need to do some things with the system.
You got it set up already?
No, we can set up while they're on break.
All right, well, if you give us a couple minutes to set up, then we'll form up right out here in the lobby.
That works.
We'll do it right there in the courtyard.
Sounds good. Let's take a, what do you need, 15?